what's shaking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orangebloods Modcast. Soon to have an official sponsor, maybe as early as next week. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by I guess technically there's no Blake Skaggs with us today, but although he could drop in, Anwar, Alex, Jason, we're all here. We're talking, I guess, mostly aftermath of yesterday's Big 12 Media Day. You're watching us here on the Orangebloods Texas Football YouTube channel, which is still a new thing for us to move the Modcast. We did it for the first time last week. Therefore, if you haven't already done it, subscribe to the channel. And if you like the video, maybe hit that like button. That stuff does help us. Anwar, I'll go to you first. Big 12 Media Days were yesterday, and you and I did a reaction show, which you can check out right here on the channel as well. Anything different today for you? Like, now it's the next morning, and it's interesting because I kind of asked you that question. It was like a few hours later. So I guess I'm ultimately asking, as time continues to go by, are all of the memories from yesterday fading, or are some standing out more than others?
It's interesting. My overwhelming thought was, I decided, to hit the road early. So I left there about like 5:30. In the morning, left out of my hotel. And the thought that I had, I was just walking to my car this morning, was, I wonder when the next time I'm going to be back in Arlington is. That was my biggest thought. I was wondering, like, will I be back here in December, or will I be back here again a year from now for Big 12 Media Days? Like, that's what my thought process is. And maybe it's just a shifting towards like the season and what everything that may or may not look like. But I think for me was, okay, I heard what he said, but I think I fast forwarded a little bit past it. And I know there's a topic that we're going to get into, but I think for the most part, I kept thinking around, okay, I heard what you said. And, we outlined a lot of things in the war room. There's still some more to come. But the overwhelming thing when we start thinking about the big picture and what Texas is about, I just wonder, when am I going back to Arlington?
Good war room, gentlemen, by the way.
Very, very good. It was a meaty one last night, for sure.
Yeah, no, that was one of those that I think, Alex, you joined me, right? Like, we enjoyed reading all of that and just going, oh, okay. Some of that was stuff that we hadn't talked about as a staff yet because it was all incoming on Thursday, but that was a meaty war room. Alex, I'll go to you next. And Jason, the same question is coming to you. Just essentially, the next day, was there anything from Big 12 Media Day for you that stood out more than anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it was Anwar's reporting about Keandre Coburn saying that Christian Jones is by far the best offensive lineman that this team has. To me, saying he's turned into a monster under Kyle Flood. That's something that we've certainly talked a lot about. Whenever I did the write-up last week on Coach Flood's coaching clinic, and one thing I did notice, I didn't really write about it. I had a lot of takeaways from that clinic, but one thing I did notice is he sure was highlighting Christian Jones a lot in his just the reps that he would show about how to run these drills and do this stuff. And it was always number 70 over there doing a lot of these things. And so I thought it was interesting, to hear Keandre Coburn, probably the best, if not probably the best prospect of any player on defense. I'm not sure the best player might be the best player on the defense, saying that by far Christian Jones has improved and he looks like by far the best offensive lineman. That to me is interesting. It's development that it's not that I couldn't have seen it coming, but it certainly comes as a nice surprise if that's what, members of the defensive side of the football are saying about it.
Jason, what about you?
Yeah, that's one of the things that stood out to me, even from the War Room report when I read it last night. I think, Alex, I literally just quoted that section and said, wow, that's interesting, because I'm not shocked, but I don't know that he's the guy I would have picked if you would have said, hey, pick the guy that's far and away the best offensive lineman. I don't know that I would have said Christian Jones. I thought that was interesting. Maybe that speaks to Kyle Flood's ability to develop some of these guys. I think that's interesting. I like the stuff about the quarterback talk, and I thought Sark was pretty honest about it. It sounds like, hey, probably won't make an announcement until a couple weeks before the season, which I think we all thought was the case. People that were hoping something might happen in the spring, that was never going to happen. I mean, A, it's too rushed. B, it just wouldn't have made sense. And I like that Sark kind of addressed the transfer thing, and he said, hey, he's not clueless. I mean, it could happen, but he thinks they're both competitors, but he didn't seem like he's losing. I think he said, in fact, I'm not losing sleep over it, I think was the quote or something along those lines. So I I thought that was interesting. And then the other thing I thought was kind of comical was the winning is hard and the fairy dust comment. I mean, those two, I guess if you're at my first impression, Ketch, when you brought that question up, those were the first things that popped in my head. Fairy dust and winning is hard. There was a thread on our board on Orangebloods, and it was like, is he trolling Tom Herman with those comments? Because we've heard those exact same things from Tom Herman. I don't think he is. I think it's just coincidence. But I thought the terminology was pretty interesting on those two things.
Jason, we're going to circle back to that because it really does warrant its own discussion. But Alex, I have to give you my jaded. I've been covering this program for this is my I'm too old for this shit moment of this event. Like, I read the Christian Jones stuff, and I had two immediate reactions. One, it's not true. I just won't believe it until I see it. Even though, like, I subscribe to the idea that Christian has a very high upside, right? It's not that he can't end up being that guy. It just feels like that would be an amazingly fast transformation.
And we didn't necessarily see it completely turned on in the spring game. So Bingo was his name-o. The other thing is, it sounded to me like maybe, and look, Keandre, if you're out there and you watch this, forgive me for suggesting this if I'm wrong. It kind of sounded like a guy that might have been trying to hook his boy up on the NIL front. Hey, that's a brand new angle these days.
Yes.
New conspiracy theory.
Forgive me, but like, it is a new conspiracy theory. And, and I only thought that because I'm not quite ready to buy in that Christian Jones, he could be the best offensive lineman on this team right now. I don't know what that means, but I have a hard time getting carried away with the hyperbole that he's suddenly potentially a force on this offensive line. It would be the single best news of the offseason, frankly. I mean, Anwar, can you think of anything better than that has happened so far that would be better than, hey, you know what, Christian Jones, all Big 12 level-ish offensive lineman, like the light switch has really come on. What would be better than that?
I mean, from an all-season perspective, that would probably be great. I mean, when we think about the worries that we've had about the offensive line going into the season, the alarm that Alex was sounding in all of 2020 of what things could look like in 2021 from a recruiting perspective, if it doesn't get better, and then what it looks like through possible attrition. So, yes, if Christian Jones ends up being the guy that Keandre is talking about, and yes, you do it long enough to know that everybody talks about someone else on the other side of the ball, like they are all world, right? And you're always going to hear that. But if that translates to what, Saturdays when it really means something, then that means Kyle Flood, took something that was a potential mess and was able to turn it around. But
then again, like Ketch said, hey, best offensive lineman on the team. What does that mean? He might be an honorable mention all conference player. I mean, we're not talking about, the 85 Bears defense, the best player on the 85 Bears defense. So, it's high praise, but you got to also kind of look at who's around him too. So
I made an 85 Bears reference earlier this
week. Who was the best player on the 85 Bears defense?
I'm just glad I got the year right. I wasn't even sure it was 85. I kind of just guessed on that. I knew
sometimes you get the 86 Giants and the 85 Bears years mixed up.
Singletary probably be the guy, right? Or Richard Dent, maybe?
Dan Hampton. They had some good players.
They were the monsters of the Midway for a reason. Yeah. So it's like picking the best Yankee in the 1927 lineup. Although I guess the fallback would always be Babe Ruth, right? Sometimes we can make these things more difficult than they need to be. Jason, Anwar and I talked about this yesterday. And again, cheap plug for the video that we did that is right here on the Orangebloods YouTube channel. Go check it out. One of the things that was interesting that a lot of the incoming transfer guys were talked about. And especially from a leadership standpoint, it was interesting that the likes of Keandre Coburn, who is viewed as a leader on this team, was so open about, man, Ben Davis has come in and Ray Thornton has come in and OVO has come in. And these guys have impressed us and made an immediate impact with just the way they do things. I thought that was, I told Anwar, I thought that was good that one of your leaders would be so publicly embracing of that, because that can always go the other way depending on the program and like the vibe inside of it.
Yeah, there could be some pushback. Hey, you know, we're the new, or you're the new guys here. We're the guys who've entrenched here. You're not gonna come in and throw your weight around. We've been here for 2-3 years, some of us. Yeah, I like it. I don't think it's totally unexpected for me, and I don't know what y'all's take was on it, but I mean, these are veteran transfers. It's not like they're freshmen. You know, you don't expect that from Xavier Worthy necessarily, but for veteran guys to come in, especially from powerhouse programs, like we're talking from Alabama, Notre Dame, LSU, you know, those are programs that have done a lot more winning than Texas does. So these are veteran players coming from power programs. You know, when they speak, you should listen. Texas players, including the veterans and the young players on the roster, need to listen to those guys because they've been around what it takes to win at the highest level. I mean, Notre Dame's come close, but so it's not a total surprise to me, but I do agree with you, Ketch. I think it's positive that the current players, but the returning players are kind of welcoming those guys with open arms. They're welcoming their voices, you know, and letting those guys kind of be leaders alongside them. Not a big surprise again, but I think it's certainly a positive step. And frankly, and I'm not saying the leadership on the Texas program hasn't been good. There have been good leaders, but whatever they've been doing hasn't necessarily been working. So maybe some outside voices that can give different perspectives may be a good thing for this program.
Alex, I want to make this officially the Xavier Worthy portion of today's proceedings. You wrote about him in, you know, your column, your article from, I think 2 days ago. I had a note on him in the war room. He came up in Big 12 Media Days as a topic of conversation. Your vibe on this kid, do you think, I guess there's an A, B, and C. Do you think that this guy is just this year's freshman flavor of the summer that we hype up, and then in the end, it's the summer of before his freshman season, and maybe we shouldn't get too carried away? Is he, hey, you know what, when you think about it, he's probably the highest ranked best player in this class outside of Jatavian Sanders, right? I mean, this was a guy that, at least on Rivals, was a borderline 5-star player, national. I think he was 61 nationally, but falls into that tier of high 4-star guys that perform just on a completely different level in terms of developing into NFL players than the 4 stars below them. Or is it C, a combination of both of those things, given that this seems to be the week where the Worthy hype has started to take off? We're, 3 weeks away from camp. What's your vibe? Is it A, this is just us overcooking the grits? B, he really is an incredible talent, and let's talk about how sensational he might be? Or C, somewhere in between the two of those things?
I feel like we're heading towards a situation where we're going to be able to get into camp, and once we get into camp, and hopefully, I mean, I'm keeping my fingers crossed they're not going to keep us out of camp again this fall. But once we get out there and see these guys and see these wide receivers, it feels like the evidence is starting to mount that if we go out there and we see Worthy with our own 2 eyes looking the way that they say he looks, I feel like at that point we might get to like B, whatever you're saying with B. Because look, I mean, if you just watch the film, like you mentioned it, I'd almost forgotten that he was that highly pedigreed a recruit, because he's kind of slight, he's very skinny, low BMI type of wide receiver, but.
And he snuck into this class. I mean,
yeah, he was kind of an afterthought to not an afterthought to the class, but it all went down weird. Like, he wasn't in any part of the big recruiting write-ups that we did after signing day or stuff like that. But you you circle back to the tape and you go, oh Jesus! Like, I mean, look at this guy. He really does look like a Devontae Smith clone. I mean, these guys are both very. You think about NFL players that have the body types of these guys, and there really aren't. You think of like. What? I mean, who can you think about in the league, right? Like Robbie Anderson, Marvin Harrison, this type of player, these low BMI, sort of skinny, just route running savants. And what he was sold on? He was sold on that kind of slot flanker, stretch Z type of position that Devontae Smith played at Alabama. It's very easy to see. When you look at the Z wide receiver position at Texas, you have Joshua Moore. But as I was putting that list together, I was just thinking the list on Orangebloods for people who didn't read was just like me saying, who are the core players going to be next year? I'm writing the defense right now. I did the offense 2 days ago, but I said, but I can only pick 2 guys from each position, right? The 2 guys from each position that I think are most likely to contribute. And you look at the Z receiver spot and you go, well, besides Joshua Moore, I mean, who else are we looking at here? Alvonte Woodard, Dejon Harrison, these types of players, it looked like Jaden Alexis is probably going to play out of the slot. I'm not sure that I would even consider him there at all. I mean, guys like Casey Kane are going to be around, but maybe he's more of an X. It's like, it seems to me very obvious that outside of Joshua Moore, we're going to be looking at Xavier Worthy. And this almost is not even a more Worthy type of thing. Like I said in the column, I understand that there were points in time last year where Joshua Moore did look like he was going to be Devin Duvernay 2.0 for the start of the season. But man, that guy, I don't know if you guys remember. I mean, he fell off. The whole offense kind of fell off. I think if you could bring in a guy like Xavier Worthy, he can look anything like he flashed the potential of on film. We get to see him in practice, and he looks like, we have guys like Josh Thompson, who's a veteran player on this team, saying that, quote tweeting guys saying he looks like Jerry Jeudy and saying like, for real, he looks like this. Troy O'Meara saying, hey,
co-signing it.
Yeah, just saying shit's true, but please stay humble. Like those are the kinds of things you hear from practice. You're like, geez, man, like they must be seeing something. And so, I think that's been one of the more exciting developments. I think we're heading towards that situation where I think if the media get to go to practice and see him after hearing all this hype, we're going to be talking about him as kind of one of the true possible freshman breakouts.
Anwar, it's interesting, specifically with this kid. Without Devontae Smith, he shows up and it's like he might need to be in the weight room a little bit before he contributes. Like he's a skinny guy. Maybe you shouldn't expect too much from a guy like that coming into his freshman year in college. All it took was for one guy with that body type to just destroy it last year. And now it's like, bring on all your skinny receivers. We're going to turn them into the Heisman Trophy winner.
I mean, Deshaun Jackson was kind of one of the first skinny receivers that just said, I don't care about that, right? And I mean, he probably still doesn't weigh much over 200 pounds if he ever hit that in his NFL career. So we've seen it be done. But the thing that Sark does really cool is that, he gets guys in space. So he doesn't just line up guys and say, this is where you're at. We saw last year with Devontae, like how he puts them, in motion and tries to get them active. So to kind of create a mismatch. So his ability to do that and his desire to want to have quick strikes. And, he mentioned 3 guys that kind of fit that build for him, which was Joshua Moore, Xavier, and the third one was Cavante Dixon, as far as like speed guys that kind of with the quick strike ability. So, if he's got them and one of those guys kind of emerges into a guy that he can lean on, then Texas has got, a really great thing. One of the other things that Keandre Coburn had said yesterday is that, it's just his ability, Xavier's, to, if a ball seems to be overthrown, like to be able to hit a second gear and to go get it. It's something that he was saying that he hadn't seen. So everybody on the team seems pretty hype about it. And as you guys know, when it comes to freshmen, to Alex's point, they always want to keep them to be humble. But when you consider the egos of receivers, when you've got one receiver propping up another receiver in the room and he's a freshman, then that guy must be pretty damn good.
That's a great point. The biggest room of divas on the team, and they're like willingly showering praise on a guy that could be taking targets away from them. I thought the exact same thing too, Anwar, at least about that very thing. That's the point you just made. Jason, any Worthy thoughts you want to give? Otherwise, I'm going to ask you a question that goes completely in a different direction.
Not really, but kind of piggybacking on what we all think. Xavier Worthy, I think, in any offense is exciting. Had he stuck with Michigan, I mean, just because his speed and his home run potential. You put Xavier Worthy in a Steve Sarkisian offense, you're getting just more bang for your buck there from the kid. And remember, I mean, Alex is right, and Ketch, you mentioned it. He did kind of sneak into the class. It was after signing day. He got to get let out of his letter of intent from Michigan. But this is a guy who almost flipped to Alabama because of Steve Sarkisian. So what he's doing supposedly or reportedly in these kind of off-season workouts is exciting. Wait till Sark really gets his hands on him, though, in the fall. Yeah, I think it could, I think it could be really exciting. Now, to answer your original question, Alex, A, B, or C, C was kind of in the middle. That's kind of my answer to everything. I think every story, hey, the truth is, that's one of my favorite things. Hey, the truth is almost always in the middle. So, I'm not expecting him to go out and be 1,000-yard receiver as a freshman, but I think he is the type of player that certainly Steve Sarkisian can build his offense around to some degree and certainly maximize his talent as much as just about any coach in the country. So Texas fans should be excited about that development.
All right, last topic before we'll go into parting shots. And I want to leave a little bit of time to discuss this because kind of to me is the meaty part from the discussion yesterday. Anwar and I talked a little bit on the video that we did yesterday evening. The expectations and what this team is and what, Jason, you joked about the winning is hard and the sprinkling of the fairy dust, all that kind of stuff. It felt like yesterday Steve Sarkisian was very honest about his team. They're good. He didn't say they were great. He wouldn't allow this year's team to be framed by their one-loss record, right? I mean, success will be determined by how we feel about things in the locker room and not whether or not we go 10-2. It felt like there was a lot of nothing crazy, but it was like his version of Charlie Strong saying we're not going to play in the national championship game this year. He said we can be competitive against the best teams on our schedule, but that can be stretched in a bunch of different directions. I guess the friction on this is that if you give a guy 5 years and he goes 8-4, 9-3 in his first year, there's really nothing wrong with that. That's a solid opening year. You could easily the next year talk about a bridge where the best way to get to 10-2 or 11-1 is to go 9-3, bring everybody back and they get better. There's just so much stress around this program with regards to recruiting elite guys and what has to happen this year so that the top guys in 2023 are on board and buying in at this time next year, this exact place, and not putting Texas on the friends list. So, or the friend zone, I guess. So Jason, just your thoughts on, there were a lot of little jokes that were made about it. It was the thing being talked about on social media was, oh my God, how can you repeat some of the same stuff that Tom Herman said? And yet I came away thinking it sounded like a coach that was just having an honest conversation with his football team. And that might not completely align with the demands that this job brings to the table.
A lot of coaches speak to, a lot of coaches use the same terminology. So maybe it's just coincidence, but, I don't know exactly what the question is, but I mean, I don't know what realistic expectations are for this team. And I don't think Sark does either. I mean, they're still unsettled at quarterback. I mean, we talked about the offensive line. I mean, there's still a lot of holes on this roster. I mean, he did say they've got talent and they've got the talent to win, but if I'm looking at this team, I mean, objectively, it's going to be another team that's going to find itself in a lot of close games. And I think it was Matt Wells said that about his team. You got to be able to close games. And that's what Texas needs to be able to do. And this, closing 2 or 3 of those close games could be the difference between 10-2 or 7-5. You flip a few of those games. So, I think Sark's realistic. And he said, hey, there's talent, but there's a lot of work that still has to go into it. I mean, I don't think he walked out of spring or even sitting here right now is sitting here thinking, hey, yeah, this is a team that's going to contend for the Big 12 championship. No doubt about it. No brainer. Could it? Certainly, but it's going to take some bounces. It's going to take some health at the quarterback position he mentioned. They're going to have to close games, and there's still work to be done. I mean, listen, they're still chasing Oklahoma. Some people would probably tell you they're going to be chasing Iowa State this year to get into that Big 12 championship game. So, I think those are reasonable expectations to get into the conference championship game. But I know a lot of fans on our board on orangebloods.com, I think I think I predicted maybe 8-4 a couple of months ago, and people thought that was just ridiculous. That was unheard of. I might have even said 9-3. I don't remember what it was, but anything less than like 11-1 was just unacceptable. And I'm like, no, hey, you gotta. I mean, listen, I'm as big a fan of Steve Sarkisian, I think, as anybody about this hire, and he's the guy. I've said this before, but he's the guy that never said it on our YouTube channel. When we were kind of talking about hypothetically who should Texas hire, this is before Sark was even an option. I said, that's the kind of guy they need. He's a Lincoln Riley-esque coach, young, innovative, exciting offense. That's what I think Texas needed. That's what I think they got in Sark. I've got full faith that they're going to get it done, but I don't know what realistic expectations for year one are. And I think Sark is kind of a realist. I don't think he's pumping sunshine, saying, hey, conference championship or bust, but he's also not poo-pooing his team to the point where, you can't even take him seriously. I think this team is what it is. It's a team with some talent. It's a team with holes, and they're obviously tried to fill some of those holes through graduate transfers. But it's still a team that needs to build its overall talent base in terms of recruiting. They're trying to do that in this 2022 class, of course. But I thought it was a pretty honest, forthcoming answer overall. I mean, I mentioned the terminology of the fairy dust and winning is hard being kind of comical, but I think there is some truth to those statements as well. So as silly as that sounds, but
Jason, for a guy who didn't know what the question was, you sure answered the hell out of it.
I just rambled on for a little bit. Yeah.
No, but I mean, there really wasn't a question. It's more of just a general discussion. Cause I think that, Alex, we keep talking about what has to happen so that you can get it feels like there might be a siren going off that we just need to tell people right now. Look, man, there's a very good chance that next year, and this isn't what they want to hear, but this team might end up having the kind of year that doesn't make 5-star guys. This might not be the kind of year that helps them beat Alabama next year for whoever the hell they have to beat Alabama for. And same thing with Ohio State. And there's such an urgency to change that narrative that Texas fans, we got to do. I get the question every week, and I usually answer like 10-2, and you got to beat Oklahoma. It feels like that ask for what Sarkisian talked about with his team is not aligning, and it feels like people need to kind of grasp that may be part of what happens this season.
Maybe, but I mean, fan bases are going to do what fan bases do. Certainly this fan base, I don't see it changing its stripes too much. But I just, as you were talking, Ketch, I pulled up the schedule, and I think it always, because Steve Sarkisian can say what Steve Sarkisian says about temper, whether his words are meant to temper expectations, whether his words are not to create any false sense of hope, whatever those words are for, I think you're wise to not be like Tom Herman and say, yeah, this is the best offensive line class I've seen since Ezekiel Elliott's, the Hogs he was running behind for that deal. So, I mean, I think it's always better to under promise and over deliver. So that could be something that Steve Sarkisian sort of buys into. And I just, you look, I mean, Louisiana, definitely. I mean, all these games are losable. It's college football, but I mean, Texas should beat Louisiana. Texas should beat Arkansas. They should beat Rice. They should beat Texas Tech. They should probably at TCU. They should probably win that game. Oklahoma, who knows? At home versus Oklahoma State. I mean, you should probably win that game. At Baylor, you should win that game. At Iowa State, that's the one that nobody worries about. That really worries me. At home versus Kansas, we should win that. West Virginia, you should win. I mean, it's like you should win. They should be favored to win all but 2 of these games, as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, he can undersell it all day long, but the fact of the matter is, you look at the schedule, you should probably win all but 2, and those 2 that you probably shouldn't win are winnable games, right? Of course, like I said,
a lot of those winnable games are losable games. That's
every
the flip
game,
side to that.
every single game.
You're a lot more
about
confident in Arkansas and Louisiana and TCU, I think, than I am.
Every single game that I just mentioned is very, very, very losable. Like every single one, whether I said they're winnable, they're losable, whatever. But just taking an objective look, I would think that Texas is probably going to be favored in 10 of those 12 football games. And so it's like, he could say what he wants to about tempering expectations and everything like that. I don't think it's necessarily out of line for fans to think that Texas has a like as Ketch said, the kind of season this year to where Bama can't just come in and, laugh in the face of Steve Sarkisian whenever he's going up in a head-to-head recruiting battle with one of these guys.
Anwar, I think that what I want to respond to Alex with is just, we do this every year. I mean, I feel like every year we have the discussion where we look at the schedule and we go, they should win that game. They should win that game. And then at the end of the year, Iowa State has 6 guys on the all Big 12 team and Texas has like 1. And it's like, how did that happen? We were not saying that in July. Anwar, I
got a lot of thoughts.
Well, I know you're gonna drop the how many 5 stars.
That's it. I'll start and end there because you brought up Alabama, and I'm like, why are we talking about Alabama?
We're only talking about them in recruiting.
Well,
that's the only reason why they got brought up.
Recruiting is a different story, but I piggyback off for Alex. When we look at it, look. At the end of the day, a coaching change was made to solve this exact problem. Right. That's the main reason why Tom Herman was fired. And that's the main reason why Sarkisian was hired. And so if you're going into it saying, yeah, man, I don't know if this guy can make the difference in these games, then you hired the wrong guy. I mean, to point blank, like that's the reason why. If it's about excuse making, then you could have kept any of the last 2 guys that were here and you keep the excuses going. But from a coaching perspective, you're expecting Sarkisian to say, okay, guess what? If you got to get close game against Iowa State and you're down in the red zone, you take the points and you don't gamble on it and run obvious plays, right? You're talking about making sure that your best running back is out there at all times. So when you have a close game versus a TCU, your best running back is out there and you don't have to worry about the fumbling problem. You're thinking that he's supposed to be the guy that if you get the lead against Oklahoma, that you don't overthink it. That you just say, all right, this is what's working. Let's continue to do it and continue to pound this team. This is a team that shouldn't have to fall behind against Texas Tech and then have to need some sort of miracle comeback in order to win that or fall behind against Oklahoma State. Like this is where Sarkisian is supposed to make the coaching difference. And so if we're saying that he can't make the coaching difference, then that's a totally different conversation, right? Because the talent is there. Again, we're talking about 2 games where you should go and say, man, Oklahoma is always a coin flip. Iowa State's got a really good team. Everything else, this to me should be the coaching difference. And that's why, even though I know you're not supposed to do it, if he's the dude, then 10-2 should be in the realm of possibility.
It's in the realm of possibility. I would just simply say, I guess Jason and I fall into the category. We just worry, and we worry about a quarterback with no experience and how long it takes for that light switch to come on. And we worry that the Christian Jones thing is a mirage and that this is still a line of just average guys. And we worry that there's not a pass rusher. And we worry that
I technically worry about the Christian Jones thing.
But I think when Jason says, I picked like 8-4 or 9-3, and I can't decide between the 2, it's all like if Tom Herman takes over last year's team and they run it back, then I think, oh, well, we're all thinking that's the difference. Suddenly this team is playing in a Big 12 championship team or game. I just wonder, it's not the same team. I think it's a lesser team on paper at this point. And yeah, I guess we will find out how good Steve Sarkisian is, because if he can do that with a lesser team, I think Tom Herman this year goes 7-5 or 8-4. So what Sarkisian can do off of that, I think will let me know how good he is. If he can do exactly what you talked about, Anwar, we can all remember what I just said this summer, and it will be an indication that he and the staff did a phenomenal job, and it deserves to be framed exactly that. If they don't quite do that, it's fair to say Tom Herman probably could have won 8. So I think those are the stakes, whether he wants them or not. Let's go into parting shots. Jason, you are the one who has the tightest schedule today. So I'm going to let you go first in hopes that you were prepared for this, and knowing that you had to hit the eject cord first.
Yeah, my first appearance on our YouTube channel, and I might be ducking out early. How about that? We haven't talked recruiting. Texas, I'll just kind of end with that. Texas, for those recruiting fans watching this, and we will be doing more recruiting videos coming up, but Texas picks up a commitment from Austin Jordan, cornerback, defensive back, kind of jack of all trades, defensive back, if you will, out of Denton. Ryan commits to Texas this week over Ohio State and Oklahoma. So pretty big pickup there for Texas. They needed, after, a miss in the defensive backfield and Terrence Brooks, this is not a guy that they really could afford to miss on. A lot of people thought that Jordan would wind up at Oklahoma. A lot of people had Texas running third in this race, honestly. Ohio State probably didn't have the numbers for them. Oklahoma, I don't know. I've heard kind of mixed signals on how hard Oklahoma pushed in the end, but this is a 4-star player, a solid player that Texas is recruiting as a corner, and he can also play the nickel. And there's some thought he might wind up being a safety in the long run, but Texas kind of needed this this recruiting win, if you will, and they got it a little bit unexpectedly from Austin Jordan. It's funny, I talked to Austin after he committed, and my days are running together. I think that might have been Monday. He did take his Texas official visit, was the last one he took. He visited Ohio State, Oklahoma. I think that was the order. And then Texas was the last one. And he told me, hey, I said, well, when did you know? And he said, I really knew right after that Texas visit. He said, it took a few days, let it kind of soak in. And then he sat down and talked to his mom, and everything just kept coming back to Texas. So I think everybody was kind of misguided on the whole Austin Jordan recruitment, but the guy never talked to media, very rarely. So it was hard to get much of a read on him. He literally said, like, on his commitment, he just announced it the night before. Hey, I've got a decision, or I got an announcement coming the next day. He didn't even say, hey, I've got a commitment coming tomorrow at 1:30. It was, I got an announcement tomorrow at 1:30. It was kind of funny. I said, well, I think everybody on Rivals, and I think even on 24/7, had their future casts or crystal balls on Oklahoma. So everybody missed it. And I said, dude, you really, as much as anybody, kept everybody guessing. And he goes, yeah, that was my point. He goes, those whole stupid future cast things and crystal balls, he goes, those give stuff away. So he didn't talk to anybody. He didn't talk to the coaches. What I was told is the Texas coaches found out about 30 minutes before he went public with this commitment. So kind of an interesting story to track. It was a little bit frustrating as a reporter trying to track it, because you're like, come on, kid, give me something. And he wouldn't. But in the end, it was a nice win for Texas, for Terry Joseph, Austin Jordan. Now they're still chasing a couple other big-time defensive backs. Bryce Anderson, Denver Harris, of course, being the main ones. Ketch, you and I have talked, and I know we've reported. I mean, there's a lot of signs with Alabama, with Denver Harris. There are signs for A&M with Bryce Anderson. I don't know what to believe. I can just tell you that in talking to sources in Austin this week, there is still confidence in Austin on both those guys. I was kind of trending the other direction on both those guys a little bit, so I don't know who's right and who's wrong there, but nice pickup this week to add to the defensive backfield in Texas. There are some thoughts in Austin that Texas is still in a good spot with a couple Rivals 100 members, including a 5-star in Denver Harris. So, we should have answers, certainly with Bryce Anderson, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Denver Harris probably going to take things into the fall a little bit, but that's kind of how the Texas defensive backfield recruiting is shaping up, along with, of course, B.J. Allen and Jalen Gilbo, the 2 previous commitments.
There you go, Jason. Nice job. Nice.
Thank you.
In, out, and you'll be out of here on time to deal with the gang of kids that you have to deal with.
Kids. Yeah.
Anwar, what about you? What's your parting shot for the day?
Just one thing I didn't get a chance to throw in last night, but just 21 days from when they were recording, August 6th is the day that training camp will start for the Texas Longhorns. So got about 3 more weeks before we get to hopefully Alex head out there to practice. And Alex gets to once again talk about Casey Thompson. I mean, I want Alex's reaction. I'm not gonna let Jason get out of here on this one. I want like a first day Casey Thompson reaction from Alex. Here we are, like 3 years later, and I want to see if he's just as convicted about it. But yeah, just that's only just quick note. Just about three more weeks until we get closer to the start of, at least start of training camp, closer to the start of the season.
I feel like you just poked the hornet's nest because you just teased Alex with the idea that he would have access to see Casey Thompson.
Wow.
And now I can't leave early. Now I've got to wait to see what Alex says in response to. Thanks a lot, Anwar.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to say in response to the Casey Thompson stuff. I think that's a bridge we've crossed over many times. But yeah, I'm certainly excited about that. Busy day around here at my house. Like I got my mother-in-law here and my kid's cousin and everything. Hopefully they haven't made too much noise. Here's my party shot. I have a guy out here redoing my damn deck on my back porch because listen to what happened. So I just had, you guys may remember, I got this deck redone like a year ago, right? And the guy who I got redid it was like, he's like, hey, we just need to put the new boards on the top. Like there's like the bones here, like the structure's like it's good. And I trust this guy, right? He's a deck guy. Who else are you gonna listen to about the joists in your deck, right? I was walking down my stairs from the platform of my stairs down onto this part of the deck the other day, and I noticed like something feels kind of rotten here, something like that. So I had this other deck dude just come and check it out. He lifts up one of these boards. He's like, "What the hell?" He's like, "What the hell happened here? Like these are all new decking on top of here. Like you just put the new decking in. You didn't change out these joists and all this stuff. What is this?" I'm like, "Well, look, the guy told me not to change out the joists, and he's the deck guy. I'm not the deck guy." I looked at him; they look kind of fine to me. He pulled it up. He's like, "Oh, this is like there weren't termites in there, but there were all these like carpenter ants and bugs and just it's all rotten and we're all rotten and gross." And it's got me. And do you know what the crazy thing was that got me thinking out of all that? I got to thinking like, dude, I need to go get my I need to go get my physical, right? And go get my stuff lined up for my prostate exam. And started thinking like, do I even need to get a proctology test yet or any of that stuff? Because you can look just right underneath, man. Everything looks fine. But this preventative stuff underneath, man.
So you thought
I was wondering where the hell that was going to tie
after
in.
lifting up a board, you needed to go inside your ass.
I look fine on the
that outside. Was a transition.
My worry is there anything festering down in like there was down in this deck is rotten. Like it was rotten. If I would have just stepped in the wrong place, I would have never even known. But like,
could you imagine that PSA commercial from Alex?
No, I can. That's why it's so funny. And look, at the end of the day, nice men's health awareness.
How old do you need to be to get the whole proctology exam? Is that
45 now? They always change. I think it's 45 maybe.
I was told 45.
The time keeps ticking. Well.
It's coming soon.
Yeah. There's nothing to it, man. Come on.
Jason enjoyed it. It's fine.
Anesthesia? Hell no. Let's go. No, you ain't putting me under for that. Come on.
This is what we get when Jason decided to say extra minutes. I don't have much of a parting shot other than to say, guys, I want you to remember this because Anwar and I talked about this on a YouTube video, and then it might have been last week, so maybe I'm remembering, but I'm just remembering too late. Our next Modcast, we're each I feel like we all know who our guys are. I mean, Jason's maybe Sark, Alex's maybe Casey Thompson, but we're all going to decide who officially we're president of this person's fan club of. So we're all going to decide who in the program. You can only be president of one fan club. Whose fan club are you the president of? I think that could make for an interesting Modcast next week. So just remind me that I said that in my parting shot this week, and it'll make next week really easy because we can just jump right into that. I'm not expecting a lot of football news as it starts to quiet down a little bit right before it picks back up again. But look,
can we make a case for our guy and then put it up to a fan vote as to who is the ultimate president?
We can do all kinds of stuff. Yes. Yeah. Well, I feel like Alex has got the most vested time of all of us. I mean, we've literally made fun of him for 3 years for those initial Casey Thompson remarks. He gets a chance to potentially cash that lottery ticket. I don't know if we'll be able to beat Alex if it's a fair vote, because he's got a head start on all of us. But yes, Anwar, we'll do all kinds of crazy stuff. We'll vote. Matter of fact, if you want to go into the comments section right now, let us know in advance who would be your president of who are you being?
Can we take Bijan out of the
Yes.
equation? That's too easy.
Yeah. I mean,
No Bijan allowed.
yeah, no Bijan allowed, but everything else is fair game. I'll even let you, if you want to take Keandre Coburn, he was there at yesterday's Big 12 Media Day. You can take anybody else. No Bijan. Jason, if you want to take Sark,
I was gonna say
it's on the table, because I think it's kind of a ballsy president of the fan club, because if you get that one wrong, we will sure as hell remember it forever.
But that's true. It'll stick with me for a long time. But it's an easy pick to get fan votes to follow me, probably. So
It's true.
I'll have to weigh the pros and cons.
It's like a
on
cheap
that,
pop. It's like a Mick Foley pop in professional wrestling. All right, look, for Alex, for Anwar, for Jason, for myself, Geoff Ketchum, thanks for watching. Again, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Tons of video content coming in the coming weeks and months. We'll do it again next week on this particular show. Later, guys.